Welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but as we like to say, more importantly, about recovery. My name is Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. Getting over a cold, so if I sound, my voice is extra deep, that's why.
So you think you're one of those guys that gets sick and sounds sexier?
I hope so.
Because to me, you sound a little nasally.
I think, the problem is I think I always sound nasally, so maybe it's just accentuated now. I don't know.
I like that. You know what? Summertime cold sucks.
Yeah, I usually get one every summer. So I got it out of the way. It's done.
Are you an avid hand washer?
I think average probably.
What's average?
Well, after you do all the important things like,
Number one, number two.
Number one, number two, before you eat. If I end up shaking a lot of hands during work, a lot of times people who come see me like to shake hands, then I've got the Purell,
I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but I feel like you only wash your hands after number two.
It's not true. No, if I go in that bathroom, I'm coming out with washed hands, man.
Right? But what if you touch the door handle and the person before you didn't wash their hands? Then you're recontaminating.
My body's strong enough. I'll be okay.
Is it? Sometime cold?
I think so.
Hey, so we're having some fun, but we want to get into the addiction world, and that's what we're talking about because it is a podcast about addiction and recovery.
And recovery, right?
And so it's the summertime months. We talked about Matt's summertime cold, and the summer is a time for parties, for barbecues.
Right.
And, I always like to give you a little tidbit about me, but I was going to my brother's house on Sunday. Me and the girlfriend and my brothers were there. And imagine...
Does she prefer to be called the girlfriend?
Well, she likes to be called the boss.
The boss, okay.
Yeah,
right.
the boss.
I just wanted to clarify.
So I was with the boss, and I was talking to my brothers. Now, imagine me times 3. That's my brothers.
Oh.
They're all kind of outgoing like me and kind of fun. But all of a sudden, it started turning to where we were giving each other jabs, not like physical jabs, but like...
Giving each other a hard time.
A hard time.
Yeah, like brothers do. And
my little brother goes, "Hey, do you remember last 4th of July?" And he goes, "I bet you don't." And
you didn't.
I didn't.
Yeah.
And I do. I remembered some of it, and I remembered making a scene, and I remember a fight, and
oh really?
Not like
fight?
A physical fight, but
with who?
With my brothers and family members. Going.
Do you know what you're fighting about?
Yeah, about my drinking.
Oh, okay.
And them being mad, and it was one of them.
They all drink, right?
My older brother drinks a little bit. My little brother drinks a little bit more.
Have they ever felt like they had a problem with drinking, or have you ever felt they had a problem with it?
That's an interesting topic. My older brother, no.
I'm sure they appreciate that I asked
My
that.
little brother,
yeah.
No. He's a lot like me,
okay.
But he's got a lot more control than I do.
Oh, okay.
But it's not my job. Like a lot of times I'm not one of those sober guys that goes around telling people not to drink. It's not my place.
Yeah. No, I know you're not.
Yeah. So, I'll go to bars. I DJ at a bar. I DJ weddings. I do all kinds of stuff where there's alcohol around. And I'm not going to be one of those guys that go, "Do you know what you're doing to yourself? Do you know what you're doing to yourself?"
Yeah, because that's pretty obnoxious. Right?
And it's not my place. Yeah. And so, but my brother said, "I bet you don't remember it." And I remember pieces, and I remember the feelings and stuff like that. And I know what they're trying to do is going, "Hey, you're doing a lot better." But every once in a while, I think about those times, and I go, "Oh man!" And it brings up regret and remorse, and I'm so happy that I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
But I've still got to acknowledge those times. And although I walk around constantly, and people are telling me, "Hey, you're doing great. You're looking good." There's still people that remember that guy.
Yeah.
And they're not so willing to give me a shot right now.
So you think your brothers were wanting to compliment you but not overdo it? They didn't want to get too gushy about it?
Well, that's their way of getting gushy. But then my older brother, who's kind of,
gave you a purple nurple and said you're doing good?
No. He just said, "Hey, why are we talking about this? Let's move on."
Okay.
Because eventually it was going to get to where I take shots and they take shots, and then it's no longer fun anymore. Now we're just seeing who can hurt each other.
And we're not talking about shots as in drinks.
Shots. You know who sings that?
I have no idea.
LMAO.
I'm really okay with not knowing that.
Okay, but I guess what I'm getting to is it's summer parties. And normally when there's parties around my family growing up, there was always alcohol.
Yeah.
And I remember sneaking, drinks from the cooler, when I was 14.
Right.
Me and my buddies and friends.
Pretty standard when that's available. When you're that age, you're curious and impulsive, right?
We've had a lot of people on here that alcohol was a no-no in people's houses. And so that kind of led to them drinking in privacy and secrecy. I mean, my parents weren't allowing me to drink at 14, but it was there.
But it was there, and so you snuck it.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, how depending on the household you grew up in, there were attitudes about things like alcohol. Either it was an accepted part of the party and it was fun and associated with celebrations. And there were still probably rules in most homes like, hey, if you're underage, don't drink. But it was there. And so the association, the thought or the feeling you have about alcohol isn't necessarily bad. It might actually be like, oh, beer goes with 4th of July.
Yeah.
Whereas other households, you're taught that's wrong, that's bad, that's harmful, you never touch it. And so people grow up with very different attitudes about alcohol. And that
association
affects,
with it.
their association. And that affects how they feel about their own drinking eventually, whether it's in private and shameful or whether you get teased by your brothers that you're out of control.
So when I got out of rehab at Pinnacle Recovery Center, where I started my road to recovery, my mom goes, hey, we won't have alcohol at the family parties anymore. And I go, why? And she goes, well, in solidarity. I don't think she said that, but
She raised her fist up?
No, yeah.
No, okay.
She was we're going to do that, to support you. And I
remember you said that.
And I said, I appreciate that, but do you guys have a problem with alcohol? She goes, no. I said, well, then it's okay. You guys should be able to do that. I thank you. That means the world to me. But
yeah, it's super thoughtful and considerate, right?
But the reality is then, so what? I'm not getting invited to parties because you're going to want to drink there? No, I've got to be able to be around alcohol and manage it myself. So I thank you. But that brings us to our guest today. We got Evaun here. How are you?
Hey.
And so you reached out to me on Facebook and you said, I have a story I'd like to tell. And what made you want to tell your story?
Well, I just think that there's got to be somebody that can relate. Hopefully I'm going to be able to touch somebody in some way and lead somebody to recovery. That's what if I can do it, anybody can. And at one point, I didn't think I could do it. At one point, I didn't even think I was an alcoholic. I didn't belong with anybody else that thought they were an alcoholic. I was mad. I was mad going into the program.
All right, before we get to the program that you went through and started your road to recovery, do you remember when you first tasted alcohol?
I came from a Latina family, so every weekend was a party. Anything we did, it was a party. There was drinking, there was alcohol. So,
did you go to a lot of quinceañeras?
No.
Dang it.
My family. No.
I just like saying that word, quinceañera. Am I saying it right?
I think so.
Isn't that the celebration of
the 15th?
15th
Birthday for little girl.
Or Cinco de Mayo. Those are the only two parties we know, right?
Right.
Cinco de Mayo and
the other
one.
The Latina family, there's a party every weekend.
Okay, so you remember drinking at a very young age then?
Going around, and my dad used to drink with my uncles and my grandfathers, and so I'd say, Dad, can I taste your beer? And he'd tell me, no, but I'd bug him enough that he'd let me taste it, and then I thought I was getting over on something. But then as they'd leave their drinks. They'd drink like part of them, and I'd go around, and I'd be that little girl that was over there drinking them.
How old were you at that time?
Oh, I started probably... I can think probably about 5, maybe, about 5 years old.
And it sounds like maybe it was associated with kind of the curiosity and the older people you like, your dad, your uncles, other people are drinking.
You emulate them.
Yeah, you emulate them.
And
the party was a fun atmosphere.
I wanted to know why they were drinking, what it tastes like. And as bad as I didn't like it, I just kept on because it was like, ugh, I hated the taste, but yet something about it just kept me going back. It was the curiosity, I guess, and I just wanted to know what was the big deal with that.
Did you ever get busted drinking at a young age?
Let me tell you, I went camping with my grandfather and my mom and dad. They were up there drinking. My grandfather had vodka, and he was drinking. He got plowed. But the next day, they were all going for a hike, and they left me and my aunt, who's my same age, behind. But he had vodka. My grandfather still had vodka in that bottle. And I got so drunk. But when they come back, I had been drinking. I drank all the vodka and filled the bottle up with water, and
that doesn't work.
That sounds like a Casey story to me.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, when my mom got back, I'm sure she knew what was wrong with me because I was passed out, but she kept smacking me, hitting me and smacking me. I was passed out and didn't do any good. But
was she worried about you, trying to wake you up, or she was just mad?
My mother was very, very aggressive.
Okay.
So she was mad. I'm sure she knew, but we never talked about it.
So even when you sobered up and came to, she never said, hey, you drank all the vodka. What's going on?
Never confronted me.
Never.
Nobody ever asked, hey, this vodka tastes like water. Nobody ever said anything. It was just quiet. And I don't know, my grandparents probably at the time didn't know I was drunk, but my aunt knew I was drunk. She was my same age. I was drinking and eating tomatoes. That's one thing I remember is throwing up tomatoes everywhere. But my mom, talk about it. Red's not my favorite color.
No. Going in or going out?
No.
And so you got drunk on a camping trip. And did that when you started to drink more regularly?
I'd go. The deal was my family was very strict. I was very social. I fed off people. So what would happen, I needed that energy. That's what kept me going. That's what kept me, I needed that. My parents didn't. They kept me confined to my room at all times. I didn't go out in high school at all. I wasn't allowed. And so I tried my way.
Just as a rule? Like you weren't allowed to socialize?
I wasn't allowed to go out. I was always in trouble. If I went one day, I could not go for months on end. My parents were very strict. They just didn't believe in that.
So
but
were you in trouble for things that kids should get in trouble, or do you think your parents were just really, really strict?
My parents were overly strict. Of course I did things, though, let me tell you, because I needed to be with these people. That was how I fed. That's how my energy was fed. I'd left school. So we'd go partying in the day. I'd get tore up in the middle of the day and, smoking weed or whatever I was doing in the middle of the day. And then go home, try to sober up by the time they got there. And the thing with that is my parents were also using.
Oh.
So I knew they would be on to me. There was a time my father was growing that weed in the backyard and had to pull it up because the cops were zeroing in. Okay. And I had went into that stash. His bag, he had a big old trash bag, black trash bag, yard bag. And I went into that and I got my own out. And that's when I was about in 9th grade at that time. But I had been doing that. But I had to be really careful because my parents knew. My parents were dabbling in that stuff.
So did they ever, so that's an interesting environment growing up in. On the one hand, your parents are very, very strict, watching what you do, keeping you in, away from other teenagers. On the flip side, they're using, growing, and distributing.
Not distributing.
Having a plethora of marijuana there for themselves, I guess.
Mostly my dad.
Mostly your dad. Okay. So, what did you grapple with that as a kid? Like, did that seem like strange to you that they were being so protective, but yet you knew they were using? Do you remember thinking that was odd?
I didn't like it. I hated it. I couldn't stand it. I hated the effect that it had on them. I hated it. The glazed over look, whatever, the drinking. I hated every bit of it. My father would drink and have a tendency to be a whole different person, almost violent. But it came to the point where in my drinking, I became that same person. But I was a blackout drunk. So when I was alcohol, I went from happy for the first drink or two to absolutely mad. I was mad at everything that had ever happened in my life. At one point, I lost a daughter. I was mad. I was so mad. I thought God was punishing me. I was raised in this Catholic environment. We went every Sunday, regardless of whether my parents were loaded or what. My dad got loaded the day before we went. And we were by the law, not by the relationship. And I'm not coming down on any Catholics. I'm not here for that. It's whatever works for you. But I was always, that guilt. I was being punished. So anything that happened. And then you get to the point where you're like, screw it.
You're listening to Project Recovery. Give us 30 seconds. We'll be back with Evaun. Let me ask you this. Did your parents ever sit you down and set rules and regulations of what is expected of you? I mean, like drinking and smoking and any of that. Did they ever say, hey, look.
We didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about that. That wasn't talked. We didn't talk about the drinking and the smoking. It was never ever spoken of. We didn't talk about that.
Does that seem weird?
Well, I mean, I think it's yes, from as you're analyzing it from the outside, but there are a lot of families where the dynamics are difficult that way. And I'm assuming maybe either your parents just weren't raised in a way that there was good communication for them growing up. That's probably part of it. Another part of it might be, as a parent, you love your kids, even if you don't always act that way, and they may have felt hypocritical, like, I can't really tell. I've had other parents tell me they find it hard to talk to their kids about those things when they're doing them. So if a parent is smoking and drinking, they have a hard time saying don't do that or setting limits on the kids because they feel like a hypocrite. I don't know.
My parents, first of all, didn't know I was doing it.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I'd left school in the day. They knew I was left in school. They didn't know what I was doing. But I was going to parties. We were having parties in the day. Well, my friends were there. It was a good time to party and have a great time. Did they ever
investigate what?
No.
I mean, I'm sure the school let them know you weren't there eventually. And I mean, it's not like it is today where I get a text when my kids
would show up, huffing and puffing. She'd even pull me out of school. I'd be like, who cares? Take me out of school. At one point, she took me out and wanted me to clean house. I'm like, cool, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
See, there's 3 things I share with my dad. I share a last name, a hairline, and a sober date. The day I quit, my dad quit.
Really?
And I said, Dad, why did you quit drinking? And he goes, because I didn't want to seem like a hypocrite. I didn't want to tell you to do something that I couldn't do myself. So I just wanted to see if I could do it. And he hasn't had a drink since the last day I had a drink.
Really? I didn't know. We hadn't talked about that.
And so I think it goes to your point that my dad, because when I was battling addiction, and these guys would come at me, you're drinking too much. My friends, my brothers, my mom, I would always throw back, you're doing the same thing.
Right.
I'm just doing it better than you. Yeah. I mean, but that's how it made sense in my head.
In your addicted brain.
In my addicted brain is that I'm just doing better than you. And so my dad would tell me, and we'd have these heart-to-hearts. But
he was still drinking.
He was still drinking.
Didn't have the same impact.
It didn't have the impact. And so he goes, I quit. And I was like, wow.
Well, I think that there's a lesson in there, and that is, parents really, I mean, you tell us if you felt like, would it have made a difference in your life if your parents had a conversation with you, been a little less strict, a little more,
There's a lot
talk
of things.
about it?
Hindsight's 20/20, but there would have been a lot of things that were different had they let me go. Had they let me go and mingle in the evenings, let me go after school, stay after school, whatever, instead of being so confined, I think things would have been different. Unfortunately, that they raised me like they were.
Did they? Well, we can't live in the past, but I'm just curious. Did they talk about what they were afraid of? Because the reality is
they just didn't know.
The reality is that's a normal drive.
They raised me the way that my mother was raised. Her father was the same way with her.
Okay.
She got married at a very young age. I drank, but the minute I got married at a very young age in high school, I married the guy in high school.
While you were still in high school?
Oh, yeah, I was in high school. And after that, once I got married, there was no more drinking, no more partying, no more anything. But my parents, my mother never drank. My mother sipped on a glass of wine forever. She never even finished the wine. My father drank my father was really deep into that. I think my mother, I know she smoked a little bit of weed. My dad, once again. But after I started getting older, started having my kids, my parents didn't do it anymore. They just stopped.
They stopped. Oh, really?
Dead stop.
Do you think that had anything to do with you leaving the house, or was that just a
No, I think they
coincidence?
were over
it. Okay.
It ran its course.
They were grown up. They were young. They were young when they had me. They were doing things that probably they should have done when they were teenagers. Unfortunately, they didn't get that chance. So they quit.
That's common. There's a regression that happens when you have to grow up a little too fast.
And there's also a little freedom of when, you get to set the rules.
Yeah. That's why everybody's worst grades in college are your freshman year.
Yeah.
Because you goof around too much.
And your sophomore year. And junior.
Once in a while, my dad will now he'll have like a Corona once in a great while, but he doesn't.
Okay,
that's not a problem.
So you got married and you said you stopped.
Stopped everything because I wanted to be. I was pregnant, and I didn't want my baby to be living in that environment. I knew how awful it was for me. I hated it. I didn't want my baby to see me drinking. I didn't want my baby seeing me do anything. Unfortunately, I married somebody who was deep in addiction of his own.
Okay. And do you feel like that brought you back around to your own use again in the future?
I'll tell you, I didn't use until I started using again in 2007.
So how long had you not used? What's that time
Oh, gosh. Frame? Well, I was in 8 when I was...
You got married at what age? Let's establish that.
I got married at 17 and didn't use again until 2007. I don't know.
How young are you now?
I'm very young. Yeah. Just really young.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I like that.
That's right.
And so 2007, you started drinking again.
I drank, and let me tell you, my husband, I adopted 2 little boys. My husband was working out of town, always worked, hard worker, always. That was his thing. He wanted me to live a lifestyle. Always made sure I had plenty, more than enough. And I was selling my house, and I just couldn't take the stress. I had my own kids. I had adopted these kids. I didn't want to adopt them. I was forced pretty much by the state. I felt forced anyway. They gave me an option. If I didn't adopt them, then they were going to take them, split them up. They were never going to see each other. I knew the baby wasn't going to thrive without his big brother. So I felt like I had to do it. So anyway, I didn't do well. My husband was gone. I had to get the house ready to sell. We needed a bigger house. I started letting them go see their biological mother because I thought, what kind of woman would I be to keep these children from their biological mother? So as they were going, then I'd be tipping the bottle. And I found that when I started tipping, I also was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. But as I was drinking, I noticed the pain would go away because I was pickling my brain. You know, I had this mentality that, I'm going to drink. It's going to take the edge off, a little bit of wine. And then it was like a challenge. I'll never be an alcoholic. I just don't have it in me. So it was like I was challenging myself. Well, lo and behold, guess what? It hit.
Did it come back quick?
Oh, quick. I drank, and I drank. I even had my husband came. We bought the house. My husband came home after working out of town for all that length of time, and I said, you know what? I need you to leave. I wanted to run and gun, and I didn't want to come home and feel guilty about it when he was sitting there looking at me with that sad face, like, how? Why?
For those who don't know, what's running and gunning?
Oh, out in the street, shooting up the town, drinking, partying. Thought my friends, the friends that I thought I had friends, they weren't friends. They were there so that I could drink. I had money. I always had money. I mean, buy all the drinks. I was there, and that's where they met me. Let's meet up at the bar.
Chances are they're still there. A lot of them are.
Oh, died in their alcoholism, in their drugs. Yeah, definitely.
So you tell your husband, you got to go. I got to get back to running and gunning.
And you got to leave. I need you to leave.
Do you think some of that was sort of like what your parents had gone through? You got married at a young age. You had a baby right away. And you needed to kind of get it out of your system.
Pieces, go back. Because, you need to get through to keep continuing life. You go through phases in life, and I skipped that. So I had him leave. He wasn't happy, but he told me. I didn't even know how to run a lawnmower. I didn't know how to do anything. I had a job. I could make money. I knew how to make money. I was good at making money. And I could manifest whatever I wanted. I was like that. But he said, I'm leaving. He says, but I'll tell you what. He says, I will not be here to mow your lawn, and I will not give you any money. I'm not paying for this house so that you can be running and gunning. Well, I'm like, cool, leave.
Wow, so you made that choice, huh?
Did he leave?
Oh, he left.
Now, are you still married?
I'm still married. Just recently, back in October, he asked me for a divorce, but that's a whole different reason. So
he's gone. You've got how many kids at home?
I've got 4. No, I've got 3 at home. I've got the 2 adopted boys, and I had a daughter that was a year older than the oldest adopted. So they were like 12, 11, and 8.
And you asked your husband in what year to leave?
Oh, that was about 2008.
2008, and you just started drinking again in 2007. How long were you running and gunning for?
For a long length of time. I'd say about 4 years, 4 years. But in that time, I was out running full force. I mean, I was here, I was there, I was all about a good time, drinking. And
was it just alcohol?
Let me tell you, my mindset. I'd start drinking, and I'm a blackout drunk. But I could feel myself starting to get buzzed, so I'd think, okay, I'm going to smoke a little weed. It's going to calm me down. I'm not going to be there. It's going to calm me right down. And so I'd start drinking, smoke a little weed. And then I'd keep going. It didn't work. It didn't work. But in my mind, I thought I had it all under control. And I was a mean drunk. I was awful. Just mean. I mean, I was mad at the world. I was just really mad. But in that time, he found someone. He found someone, and I wanted to quit. I wanted him home.